They told me it was just the market. I nodded, smiled politely, and congratulated them, because in that moment, they had no idea they had just lost the one person quietly keeping their entire market from collapsing. I signed my resignation right there in the HR office, my hand steady, my voice calm, my mind already several steps ahead. 12 minutes later, the system dashboards across Brightforge systems began lighting up red. But the technical failure wasn't what made them panic. The real terror began when they realized what I had sent before I even reached the parking lot. My name is Rachel Donovan. I'm 39 years old, and for almost 10 years, I was the principal reliability architect at Brightforge Systems. That title never sounded impressive at dinner parties. It didn't come with applause, keynote invitations, or flashy slide decks. But it meant that when a surgeon in a regional hospital clicked a button to check a patient's allergy history, the data appeared instantly instead of timing out. It meant that when a bank teller in the Midwest processed a withdrawal, the ledger actually updated. I was the invisible wall between order and digital chaos, and no one notices a wall until it's gone. I realized exactly how invisible I was the morning I sat across from Dana Keller in the glass-walled HR office, the one they like to call the people space, even though nothing human ever happened there. Dana wore that perfectly trained corporate smile, the kind that's meant to project warmth but actually communicates indifference with surgical precision. She slid a single sheet of paper across the table toward me, smooth and confident, like she was rewarding a well-behaved employee. She said, softly, "We've completed the annual compensation review, Rachel. I think you're going to be pleased. Leadership really values your stability." I didn't touch the paper. I didn't need to. My eyes went straight to the bold number near the bottom. 2.1%. The room felt very quiet. I didn't frown. I didn't sigh. I simply did the math in my head. Inflation was hovering near 4%. This wasn't a raise. It was a pay cut dressed up as gratitude. But the number itself wasn't what made my hands feel cold. What made my stomach tighten was the comparison that flashed through my mind instantly. Gavin Royce. Gavin had joined the company 3 months earlier as Director of Data Transformation. He had a shiny MBA, an expensive suit, and a vocabulary made entirely of buzzwords like synergy, paradigm shift, and future-ready infrastructure. He also had a base salary nearly 40% higher than mine. I knew the number because Gavin was careless during screen shares, and browser tabs never lie. This was the same man who had pulled me aside just days earlier to ask whether a load balancer was physical hardware or more of a cloud thing. The same man who had been asleep at home while I patched a critical vulnerability at 3 in the morning, one that would have exposed hundreds of thousands of patient records. He was paid like a savior. I was paid like a cost center. Dana tilted her head slightly. "Is there a problem?" she asked, tapping the paper with her manicured nail. "This is actually above the standard merit pool." I repeated the number out loud, 2.1%. Dana nodded. "Yes. It reflects current market realities." I looked at her and said calmly, "Gavin Royce makes 40% more than I do. He's been here 90 days. I've been here 9 years. Last month, I manually stabilized the ingestion pipeline during a live failure that would have exposed medical data across 4 states. Gavin was offline. Asleep." Dana exhaled slowly, the kind of rehearsed sigh used when dealing with someone she'd already decided not to take seriously. "Rachel, we've discussed this. You're comparing apples to oranges. Gavin is in a strategic leadership role. His compensation reflects future-facing impact." She leaned in, her voice lowering, hardening. "Your role, while vital, is operational. It's maintenance. It's not strategic." There it was. The word they always used when they wanted to shrink you. Maintenance. To them, I wasn't an architect. I was a janitor. Skilled, sure, but replaceable. Invisible. They didn't understand that in high-availability systems, operations is strategy. When systems go down, there is no future revenue. There are lawsuits. I looked at the paper again, then back at Dana, and in that moment, I understood something with perfect clarity. No argument would matter. They had a model. They had a chart. And I was trapped in a box labeled operational. So I reached into my bag. Dana visibly relaxed, assuming I was reaching for a pen. Instead, I placed a sealed white envelope on top of the compensation letter. "What's this?" she asked, her smile faltering. "Open it," I said. She tore the flap and read the single page inside. My resignation. Short. Professional. Final. I took my pen, glanced at the clock on the wall, 10:14 a.m., and wrote the time beside my signature. Then I added 2 words. Effective immediately. Dana's face drained of color. "Rachel, you can't do this," she stammered. "We have notice periods. Knowledge transfer requirements. We support hospitals. You can't just walk out." I stood up, feeling lighter than I had in years. "You just told me my role isn't strategic," I said. "So I'm sure your strategic leaders can keep the lights on." She scrambled. "We can talk about the percentage. Maybe 3%. Goodbye, Dana." I walked out of the glass office without looking back. I packed my desk quickly. A framed photo of my dog. My favorite mug. Everything else stayed. As I headed toward the elevator, Miles O'Connor, an engineer I had trained from junior level, gave me a small wave. I felt a brief pang of guilt, then let it go. Miles was smart. He would survive, or he would leave. The elevator doors closed. My phone buzzed. Ping. Corporate email removed. Ping. Calendar access revoked. Ping. Device remotely wiped. Efficient. I almost admired it. Outside, the sunlight felt harsher than expected. I dropped my badge into the security slot and walked toward my car, heart pounding, future uncertain. Then my personal phone vibrated again. Unknown number. The message read, "Are you sure you want to do this? They activated the new compensation model this morning. There's something very dirty in the algorithm. You need to see what I found before you disappear." My pulse slowed. I typed back, "Who is this?" The reply came instantly. "Someone who knows what Gavin is really paid. Check your encrypted email." I stood there for a moment, staring at the Brightforge building behind me. From the outside, it looked flawless. Glass. Steel. Confidence. But I knew where the cracks were. I got into my car. If what that message said was true, then my resignation wasn't the end of the story. It was the opening move. And they had no idea what was coming. I drove to a small coffee shop 3 towns away, the kind of place where no one asks how long you've been sitting and the Wi-Fi is fast enough to disappear into. My hands were steady on the steering wheel, but my mind was already racing. That message in the parking lot hadn't been random. Someone inside Brightforge knew something, and more importantly, they were scared enough to reach out to me after I'd already walked away. I ordered black coffee, opened my laptop, and connected to my encrypted inbox. The file waiting for me wasn't dramatic. No threatening subject line. Just a spreadsheet with a name that sounded harmless. Total rewards optimization model. That was when I realized the real story wasn't about my raise. It was about how carefully they had planned not to give it to me. As I scrolled, patterns started to emerge. Names blurred into numbers, numbers into intent. There was a column labeled Retention Risk Index. Another called Strategic Alignment Multiplier. And then there was the one that made my breath catch. Combine Coefficient. Gavin Royce's number was 1.47. Mine was 0.79. I hovered over the comment attached to my cell. High roll stickiness. Low mobility risk. Market adjustment unnecessary. They hadn't paid me less because they couldn't. They paid me less because they believed I wouldn't leave. My loyalty wasn't a virtue to them. It was leverage. I leaned back in my chair and laughed once, quietly. 10 years of late nights. 10 years of emergency patches, undocumented fixes, silent heroics that never made it into a slide deck. And according to their algorithm, that made me safe to exploit. I didn't close the file. I saved it. Then I saved it again. Because I'd learned something early in my career. When a system is corrupt, the logs matter more than the explanations. My phone buzzed. A text from Tasha Green. They're asking for the root credentials on the legacy ingestion server. Nobody knows them. Gavin looks like he's about to pass out. Did you really leave? I stared at the screen. That server handled data for 3 of the largest hospital networks in the state. If it went down, doctors wouldn't see patient histories. Surgeries would stall. Pharmacies would freeze. And I knew the credentials. I also knew that in their rush to wipe my access, they'd forgotten the one thing that mattered. The break glass override was bound to my profile. When they deleted me, they deleted the key. I didn't reply to Tasha. Not because I didn't care, but because I did. Anyone still inside was standing in the blast radius now. I closed my laptop and waited. I didn't need to be in the building to know what was happening. I could feel it. Systems don't fail loudly at first. They hesitate. They stall. They start asking questions no one can answer. 12 minutes after I signed my resignation, the first alarms would have gone off. Red boxes on dashboards. Latency spikes. Ingestion queues backing up like traffic after an accident. My phone rang. Marianne Holt, the CFO. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. I declined it. The third time, I answered and said nothing. Rachel, she said, her voice tight. We have a situation. There's been a disruption in the ingestion pipeline. We need the override credentials. I kept my voice calm. I don't have them anymore. My profile was removed at 10:17. There was a pause. A sharp inhale. Can you come back? Just briefly. We'll reactivate your access. We'll discuss terms. I smiled, even though she couldn't see it. I'm no longer an employee. Accessing your system would be illegal. I wouldn't want to expose the company to liability. She raised her voice. This isn't a game. Hospitals are down. You're right, I said. It's not a game. It's governance. I hung up. By the time I pulled onto the highway, the public status page updated. Critical outage. Data sync halted. I imagined the war room. Executives pacing. Consultants dialing in. Gavin standing in front of a wall of error logs written in a language he didn't speak. Someone would suggest restarting nodes. Someone always does. And that would make it worse. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. A voicemail from Gavin. Hey, Rachel, it's Gavin. Look, we're a team, right? Just tell me what command to run. I can get a consulting fee approved. $500 an hour. I deleted it without listening to the end. They still thought this was about money. It wasn't. It was about consequences. Then came the pivot. Accusations. Miles texted me. They're saying you planted a logic bomb. Legal's involved. They're trying to pin this on you. I felt a cold flash of anger, then clarity. Of course they were. If they could frame this as sabotage, insurance would cover the losses. The algorithm wouldn't be the villain. I would. I opened my secure folder and pulled 2 files. System access logs showing my credentials revoked at 10:17. Server error logs showing the first authentication failure at 10:38. 21 minutes later. Cause and effect. I sent them to my attorney with 1 sentence. If they say my name publicly, we sue. Then I did something else. I opened the independent whistleblower portal for the Brightforge board. Not HR. Not the CEO. The audit committee. I uploaded the spreadsheet. The email from Dana calling the model proprietary. My analysis showing the pay suppression pattern. And I wrote a summary that didn't accuse. It explained. This compensation model optimizes retention cost by underpaying employees predicted not to leave. It disproportionately impacts senior women and long-tenured engineers. The current outage is a direct result of governance failure, not technical sabotage. I hit submit. And I leaned back. The fallout was immediate. Security seized laptops in HR. Marianne disappeared from meetings. The board demanded answers. And then my attorney called me with a detail so absurd it almost felt fictional. The Compaline vendor didn't sell it as a fairness tool. They sold it as a leverage engine. A way to pay people just enough not to quit. And Gavin's executive sponsor? A board member. His uncle by marriage. Nepotism wrapped in data science. 2 days later, the board reached out. Not with threats. With humility. They didn't ask for a rate. They asked for terms. I returned as a consultant, not to save face, but to stabilize patients and people. I laid out non-negotiables. Transparent pay bands. Retroactive corrections. Elimination of executive sponsorship variables. A technical career track that didn't require pretending to be a visionary to be valued. They agreed. They didn't have a choice. I walked back into the building and fixed the system in 4 hours. Miles worked beside me, silent and focused. When the dashboards turned green, no one cheered. They just exhaled. Marianne resigned that afternoon. Gavin's role was eliminated. Dana stayed, but her power didn't. 2 weeks later, Tasha texted me a photo of her new offer letter. 45% increase. Back pay included. I'm crying in the parking lot, she wrote. I closed my eyes and smiled. I didn't go back to Brightforge. I didn't need to. I started my new role at Red Harbor, where the CTO looked at my code instead of my risk score. Where red flags stopped deployments instead of careers. And when people ask me now what happened, I keep it simple. They told me it was the market. I believed them. So I let the market respond. If this story resonated with you, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and whether you've ever been told your value was just the market. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with someone who needs the reminder. Sometimes the most powerful move isn't asking for more. It's walking away and letting the system reveal itself.